Welcome to week 5. We've got something really cool for week 5. We're going to take a look at looping. This is the week that's really going to decide whether you're a computer programmer or not. This is where things get really exciting and really sophisticated. But before we get into what we're going to do with loops, let's remind ourselves how we got to this point. Through week 4, we explored the Boolean type a little bit more with comparison operators and Boolean operators. We talked about if statements and elses and elifs and things like that. And going back to previous weeks, even before that, we need to remind ourselves for this week what we know about variables. Because when we start writing loops, we're going to have to be very comfortable with updating variables. But if we remember everything we knew from week 4 and we remember how to update variables, we're going to be successful in this week's videos. What do I mean by looping? Looping essentially means the ability to repeat statements. The idea behind this is a lot of computer programming is taking a simple operation and repeating it. That's really fundamental to computer programming. The example that we have on the bottom of the slide here, you guys might remember from week 1 that the hardware that we use, computer hardware, doesn't have a machine code instruction for exponentiation. Python does offer an exponent operator. How does Python offer an exponent operator if the hardware doesn't have an exponent instruction? The answer is it might be doing some repetition. It might be implementing exponentiation with repeated multiplication. There are lots of operations which can be broken down into repeating a simpler operation. That's what loops are for. We use loops, as we mentioned there, we use loops to reduce code redundancy. Sometimes it's more convenient to use a loop. Sometimes you really just have to use a loop because you only have a simple operation that has to be repeated to do what you want. Python has 2 types of loops, a while loop and a for loop, and we're going to start off in this course by looking at while loops. The syntax for a while loop should look quite familiar to us because it looks almost exactly like an if statement. Before we had talked about elses and elifs and stuff, we just had a simple if, condition, and then statements. And that's what a while loop looks like, except that it uses the word while instead of if. In terms of the mechanics of how Python executes a while loop, it's actually quite similar to an if statement as well. The idea is, unlike an if statement, so in an if statement, Python would check this condition, and if the condition were true, it would execute these statements, and then execution would just continue on afterwards. With a while loop, we're going to start off the same. We're going to check the condition. If the condition is false, we're just going to skip down past the loop and continue executing. If the condition is true, we're going to execute the statements inside here. All of that is the same, except at the bottom of these conditional statements, we're then going to come back up to the top, and we're going to re-evaluate the condition. And if the condition is still true, then we're going to do this all over again. And we can do this possibly infinitely, hopefully not infinitely, in this course if we don't make a mistake. Since we want the loop to eventually stop in this course, that means the condition should eventually become false. So if we're imagining that the condition was initially true but then became false later on, that gives us a clue that probably the condition is going to involve a variable, and that variable is going to change inside the loop. That's how we're going to make the loop work. Okay. As I mentioned, this process could continue infinitely. It is possible to write an infinite loop. In this course, we're going to hope that we don't write an infinite loop. There are some cases where an infinite loop is actually desirable, but we're not going to explore that in this course. We're going to look at loops for the purposes of repetition, for repeating a simple operation only as much as is needed. And so we will try to avoid infinite loops. Okay, that gives us an introduction to the syntax and the mechanics of a loop. We're going to need a little bit of explanation before we actually start writing code with loops. How do you problem solve with loops? Let's build up to that in the next video. See you in the next video.